Hey everybody, happy Saturday.
Well,
Feel like a DJ here. It's top of the hour. Time to play the rock and roll. Um, yeah, I hope you guys have had a great day. I don't know where everybody is dialing in from, but in Birmingham, it has been incredibly warm today. And I have to admit that I cracked open that Riesling a little early. Had to just knock off a little of that heat and uh, uh, freshen up with a nice glass or two of the Riesling. But welcome everyone. Um, we have still more people signing on, but let's go ahead and get started. I know I say this every time we have a virtual tasting, but I really am incredibly excited about tonight's event. One of the main reasons is that Merf was kind enough to join on a call. Gosh, it seems like a month and a half, 2 months ago, and this incredible thunderstorm blew through Walla Walla, knocked his power out, made me look like a liar because I was busy telling everyone about how the rain shadow from the Cascades makes everything to the east of the Cascades dry, never any rain. And he thought he was going to get struck by lightning. So Merf, thank you so much for coming back. I'm so thrilled to have you along for the ride tonight. So yeah, I hope the weather in Walla Walla is a little bit better today for you.
yeah, a little bit better than the last time I talked to you. It was 80
Yeah.
degrees today. Beautiful day. I went golfing.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. It's what all winemakers are supposed to do, right?
Yeah, and if you're good at golf, usually you're not very good at golf if you're a winemaker, but it was all
Yeah.
right today.
Gotcha. Well, as always, we've got a kind of a few kind of basic housekeeping kind of things that we like to go over before each event. As always, we encourage interaction tonight. We've got Merf, who's happy to answer any and all questions about anything, whether it relates to Washington wines or, he's also got a background in brewing beer. So tonight's the time to have at it. You can unmute yourself and ask questions. You can raise your hand. You can pass them through the chat room, but definitely take advantage of asking questions tonight. Also, tonight's charitable partner is United Ability, and like always, we'll be accepting those virtual tips through Venmo. You can send those to Jones is Thirsty, and we have Dave Barry from United Ability who's going to say a few words about some of the really cool things they're doing in the community and why this is such an important time for United Ability and, frankly, charitable organizations all over the country. And then, like y'all always do, you're so cool about it, is to post what's going on your patio or in your kitchen or on your boat or wherever you are. Just post some of those shots to Instagram. Tag Jones is Thirsty if you remember to. But I love seeing some of the shots from all these great activities. You guys can really throw out some pretty amazing spreads. So love to see that. Dave, are you on?
I'm here.
I think I see you here. Hey, man.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
I'm great. Tell us a little bit about United Ability and maybe just a high level of the organization, and then the mission of what United Ability is doing, and just get us up to speed.
Absolutely. Happy to. And also, thank you, Scott and Merf, for hosting this event and this virtual wine tasting tonight. I know, Scott, you've been doing these for for a little over a month now, or even longer, and I've been following along, and they're really well received. But on behalf of United Ability, we're honored to be part of this fun event. United Ability is 72 years old. We began in 1948 by by a group of concerned citizens who saw a need to help children and adults that had cerebral palsy. Back then, they weren't calling it cerebral palsy. They were, people with that were called spastic. So we started out as the Spastic Aid Society of Alabama. And much like that group of concerned citizens, they saw a need and they met a need, much like you're doing by hosting these events that are benefiting organizations like ours. We're unique in the state in the fact that we serve children and adults with all types of disabilities, and through our 10 programs. We start serving children who are born either with a disability or at risk for disability at birth, and we go all the way through our adult day program that has that we serve people that are in their 80s. In 1972, we changed the name from Spastic Aid Society to United Cerebral Palsy of Greater Birmingham, and most people that have grown up in the Birmingham area know us as UCP. The unique thing is on March 13th, like for us, like with many organizations, businesses, and families, life changed. And through the miracle of technology, much like we're using tonight, we never missed a beat. I mean, we closed our campus on Friday, March 13th, and on Monday, March 15th, we were seeing families and individuals through the miracle of Zoom and other technology platforms. And so, much like we're using tonight to laugh and to learn more about wine, we've been using it to stay in touch with the over 5,700 individuals that we serve annually. Some of our programs have begun to reopen safely according to state guidelines, and others are still remote, but they're still active. And, we are working diligently. When I read something when this first started that with people working at home and organizations that the workday went from 8 hours a day to 12 to 13 hours a day. And there have been days that I know that our dedicated staff is like, is it Saturday? Is it Sunday? What day is it? We're going at it. And we have some of our dedicated staff have joined us tonight, and we are thankful that you've chosen to honor us and to work with us. And we're very excited to learn more and see what everybody's eating. We know what everybody's drinking, so it's going to be a tremendous night. And Scott, Merf, thank you so much, and let the games begin.
Yeah, thanks, David. I appreciate it, and to you and your team, really appreciate all the work that you're doing in the state. Some really great stuff. So it's our honor to be able to come alongside y'all tonight and have a little fun, and hopefully fill up that virtual tip jar. So again, you can make those virtual tips on Venmo at Jones is Thirsty. All right, so let's get back to the wine now. And Merf, we didn't get a chance to do this last time. We were just getting into it when I guess to your camera right, the thunderbolts were flashing. But tell us a little bit about your journey into wine. For those of you, they're sipping your wine now, and for many of the folks that are on this tasting tonight had your Chardonnay during the Desperately Seeking Chardonnay tasting. So tell us a little bit about your journey so we can understand kind of where you're coming from, because I don't want to steal your thunder, but you got to Washington via Iowa and had a passion for making beer, and now you're making these amazing wines, both at Merf
Thank you.
and then at Northstar Winery. So help us understand what that journey's been all about.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you all for participating, and I'm glad to be supporting United Ability. Yeah, I grew up on a farm in Iowa, and I'll keep this version short. I was born and raised on a farm in Iowa. My brother's still there. He lives in the house that my great-grandfather built. Mom's still back there. I talk to her almost every day. And but in 1990, I moved out to Seattle, loaded up everything I owned, moved out to Seattle. And at that time, if you remember, craft beer it was a new thing. There wasn't a lot of craft breweries.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law and I started brewing beer, and I got excited about it. I was in a really good area for it in Seattle, the Northwest area, and got pretty good at it. And I went to beer school. There's beer school, and started brewing beer. And I got a job at a brewery when I got back from beer school, and it happened to be in Yakima, Washington, Burt Grant's, which was owned by St. Michel Wine Estates. Yeah. So St. Michel Wine Estates, the parent company of the winery I worked for. So things happen in your life for a reason, and I was in a good spot, and I quit working in 1995. I love what I do, making beer and then moving into wine. But I worked there, and when St. Michel was getting ready to sell the brewery, they asked me if I wanted to stay on board to make wine. And I had met the winemaker for Northstar. He'd come down to the brewery and pick up his beer, and he'd drop off some wine. That's when I really started drinking wine. Yeah, it was a great relationship, and he was a science geek, so we'd geek out. I was doing product development. We'd hang out and talk, about making beer and wine. And that's where I first got my exposure to wine. And in 2001 or 2000, they hired me to go, or I switched over to the wine side, and it was going to be working for Northstar. And at the time, and still is ultra premium luxury winery, a small winery. And I jumped at the chance. I knew I was going to be moving to Walla Walla, familiar with the area, wanted to come down here. For those that haven't been out here, Walla Walla is about 4.5 hours southeast corner of the 4.5 hours from Seattle, southeast corner of the state, town of like 40,000 people. And when we moved here, my wife and I in 2002, 2001 was my first harvest. We moved here in 2002. We built the winery. There were 30 some wineries. Now there's 180 wineries. And that's just a reflection of the area and what's going on in the industry.
Yeah.
And so I got into wine. That was my first harvest. Went to Washington State University, got a degree in enology and viticulture, became head winemaker 2006. I'm still currently at Northstar. Love making those. They're ultra premium Bordeaux style, Merlot, Cabernet. We do 10 different wines there. But then we moved into the Merf wines a few years back. A friend of mine who's in the company and Ted Basler, who was the CEO at the time, they know they need to keep me busy, like when I was going to school and working at the winery. So they said, why don't let's look into doing this Merf project. And I was really excited about it, a little taken aback, Iowa guy, humble, to put my name on something. But what I love about doing this project was it allowed me to make, wine, reach more people, make it a everyday drinking, affordable wine. And we make, as you said, the Chardonnay and the Cabernet, and tonight we'll have the Cabernet. So it's been a blast. I mean, I seriously really don't work. I just, have fun with people. You know how it is. We have fun with people. We drink wine. I love harvest. Harvest is coming up soon, and I just love what I do. And it's, the hardest thing is trying to, make sure you can still fit in your pants.
Yeah. Well, there's so many things that I personally want to ask because we have you captive on camera now. And I know that there'll be some other questions that bubble up through the crowd. But the first thing I have to ask Merf is, when you transitioned from the brewery to being on the St. Michel side, did you have, the beard and the flannel shirt, because you're so clean shaven now? Like, did you have the whole Seattle grunge craft brew thing going on, or like the ZZ Top beard?
No, but I saw a lot of good music in the early 90s in Seattle, I'll tell you that. But unfortunately, I can't, good or bad, I can't really grow a beard. I don't know if I
Yeah.
inherited that, but no, it was a fun transition. And, fermentation science is fermentation science.
Yeah.
Beer, I say, and I've done both. So, engineers make beer and farmers make wine. And what I mean by that is you engineer in the brewery, you get malt in, you get barley in every day, and you manipulate that to create the product. Wine starts in the vineyard. You're farming, you're in the vineyard. How you treat those grapes throughout the season is what you're going to get in the winery, and then you work your magic in the winery, but it happens once a year. You can make beer every day. So, but it's very similar. I think one of the good things that I appreciate and I brought to St. Michel, I had a lot of good sanitation practices that I learned in beer that's not necessarily needed in wine, but it's still good to have.
Yeah, my
Wine's
wife
a
and
little
I,
more forgiving.
Yeah, I was going to say, my wife and I 2 years ago, we won an auction, and we had a chance to go to a brewery and brew about 150 gallons of our own beer. And we had the brewmaster for an entire day from sunup to sundown.
Nice.
And the time we actually spent brewing the beer was short compared to the time that we spent cleaning and sanitizing and hauling hoses and scrubbing things down and swashing things out. It was incredible. I really had a newfound respect for, to your point, the sanitation practices that go into making beer at all those different phases from pre-fermentation to the very end.
Smells great though, doesn't it?
Oh man, it was the whole morning. It just smelled like fresh loaves of bread in an oven.
Yeah.
It was nuts.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about wine.
Sure.
I mentioned this for anybody who's been around Jones is Thirsty for any length of time. They know that I'm an enormous fan of wines from Washington State for so many reasons. We touched on this at the Desperately Seeking Chardonnay when we talked about your Chardonnay. But one of the things that I'm so excited to dive into tonight is that we're looking at three very different varietals, the Riesling, Chardonnay, and the Cabernet Sauvignon, that have, that historically, especially, well, I guess for Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon, renowned to be international grapes. They have, historic homes where, the highest expression of those grapes is said to be made. Same with Riesling. But Washington, of all these places, tends to be one of those unique viticultural areas where these three vastly different grapes that in Europe grow in much different climates. And we'll look at that. I have a slide for that in the map that you'll hopefully will be able to talk us through. But I think there's just so much to learn and unpack for folks who, in terms of New World wines, have really only focused on California, maybe Argentina, Chile, but probably mostly California, maybe a little bit of Oregon. But I just think it's so cool to be able to dive into Washington State. So I think the first thing to do is I hope that all of you have been drinking along the way, but before I forget, cheers to everyone. Let's all take a nice little swig of our wines. But I guess, Merf, I guess the first place to start is to acknowledge that Washington is, in terms of just wine production in America, outside of California, Washington is the second largest producer of wine. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I think that's significant. And then also, I guess the other part to touch on is, I think for most people who haven't traveled to Washington, they think of Seattle, rainy, cloudy, right on that chilly Pacific Northwest. But unlike the freak storm that comes through Walla Walla every once in a while, the Cascades really do create this unique kind of dry, high desert climate, right? That is, generally speaking, is really great for grape growing. Abundant source of water from the the melting snow from the Cascades, you've got the Columbia River. So you have kind of the bones of what it means to have a viticultural area that's kind of custom made for wine.
Yeah, when I lived in Seattle, and the interesting thing about Washington State is we have rainforest on the peninsula, which gets, I don't know, 120 inches of rain a year. Seattle doesn't get as much rain as you'd think. It's just always gray. It's kind of like San Francisco, and it might get, I don't know, 40 inches, 20 to 40. We probably get about 10 inches of rain here. I think the first wine you've got, the Riesling, Ancient Lakes areas it's sourced from, which is up by the gorge, by the way, where they have concerts. That gets about 6 inches of rain a year. We're in a desert-like conditions.
Yeah.
And I know you said it was warm there in Alabama. We get warm here, but we had 20% humidity today. I mean, it's a dry heat.
So you don't feel it. Yeah.
No, you don't feel the heat. And as you said, the good news is we have snow in the winter, and we get that runoff, and we can irrigate. So a lot of things do really well here. It's not just grapes, but grapes do well, obviously. But the Eastern Washington, when you go east of the Cascades, is where potatoes are grown. There's peaches, apples, of course, a lot of wheat, and also, the grapes. I don't know where quote me on it, but we're up to 60,000 acres or something like that now, which I started, it was only like 30,000. And there's, that's all dependent on demand. If there was more demand as we grow this, there's still more acres out there to grow fruit, and we can produce more. But yeah, it's just ideal place. Lots of sunshine, and I said a little rainfall, and we can irrigate. The other thing that's kind of unique is that we have the south-facing slopes, which are good for grapes too. It gives you a nice aspect of the sun. And I can go on, and I'm trying to keep it. I don't want to talk too much on it, but like the Missoula floods that came through and deposited these amazing soils for us to grow fruit. It's just an ideal place.
Let's definitely talk about those, because those south-facing slopes are really part of the whole conversation about all three of these varietals. And let's talk about that Kung Fu Girl first. And I hope you can see this, Merf. I just shared my screen. I put up a map of the state, and in my virtual wine tastings, I really try and drive home the importance of understanding this this temperate zone in the northern hemisphere between 50 degrees latitude north and 30 degrees latitude north, and that being kind of the on paper. Kind of the ideal zone for growing vinifera grapes. And so what I wanted to do as part of this map is not only highlight some of these Columbia Valley, the larger AVA, but then some of those sub-AVAs within the Columbia Valley, where many of these grapes are sourced, but show again just how important latitude is for Washington. And with Walla Walla being at about 46 degrees north latitude, that's right in line with Beaune, which is the kind of the capital of Burgundy. It's actually a little farther north than Bordeaux. But as we talk about Riesling, we think about the northern reaches of that temperate zone. You think about the Champagne region, Rhomes, that's at 49 degrees, and then the Rheingau, which is one of the historic homes of Riesling, being at 50 degrees north latitude. So really cold, at least cold weather. I guess most of these regions have some geographic element that helps moderate the temperature, whether it's a body of water or mountains or something. But it shows that range. And the thing about this Kung Fu Girl, the first one that we're tasting is, I don't know that outside of, maybe if you've been to the Finger Lakes in New York, I don't think that most consumers think about Riesling per se being a grape that is widely produced in America, but Washington actually does a good bit of Riesling, and this Kung Fu Girl is, I think a really terrific example of a value-priced, approachable Riesling that on a day when it's, 95 degrees and, 80% humidity in Alabama is just a great, refreshing, food-friendly wine.
I love Riesling. It's just, it's refreshing. It goes with so many different foods. I think one of the things is for me, and Scott maybe know more about than I do, but it can be confusing for consumers, I think, because they always think it's sweet. There's so many different styles that you can you can try and drink, but it's just I love drinking it, like I said, on a hot day, and it goes with so many different foods. And it is it's as you said, it's kind of a reflection of our state. There's so many different varietals in one area, one state in the United States that can produce this. Riesling does great here, and there's just a couple places along Lake Chelan, which is kind of similar to Germany. The little slopes there.
That's right.
But the Ancient Lakes is a pretty cool area because it's not much rain up there, and it's east of the Columbia River, just beautiful where the Columbia River is coming through. And I said earlier, that's actually where the Gorge Amphitheater is there. If you're where our big concerts are at. Dave Matthews plays there 3 days a year, except for now. So.
Well, another side note, I give you props for actually remembering some of those great shows. So that shows that you've done well. You've made good use of your time, but I guess dementia is not in your future. So well done.
It might be, but not yet.
Well, one thing I for those of the folks that are maybe new to Riesling, one of the things that and Merf touched on it is that when it's made in its classic style in Germany, because it's so cold and they fight so hard to ripen the grapes because of sunshine, that the quality levels are really built around sweetness. And then if you've had bad examples of Riesling, they're super, super sweet, but that's definitely not this style. There's a little bit of residual sugar in the Kung Fu Girl, but the thing that I want you to know about Riesling as a great varietal wherever it's grown is that it has this really wonderful natural acidity, even when it fully ripens. And we'll let Merf talk about this with his cab for sure, but a lot of times what happens is the longer the grapes have to ripen, you run the risk of because the vine has such high energy needs that they end up burning off some of that acid to continue to provide energy for the vines. And sometimes the later it goes, you end up losing a lot of that acidity. But with Riesling, even when it's ripened through a greater length of time than it may, say in Washington than it would be in Germany, you still get that great refreshing acidity, which is great when it comes to having food with it, but it also is one of the elements that lets Riesling age for a while. They're really age-worthy wines, and for those of you who might have a half-consumed bottle of Riesling, that acidity also lets it stick around longer. If you chuck it in the refrigerator to let it sit overnight or for a couple of days, it'll stay fresh for a good while. And also, the other thing that you'll notice about this wine is that Riesling rarely is Riesling aged in oak barrels. It's usually fermented and aged in a neutral container, so it stays fresh and crisp. And for those of you who have had a sip, you'll know right away that Riesling is a different bird than Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay or even like Pinot Gris. It's got this wonderful floral element to it, and dare I say, at least in this one, and I mean this in a really good way, but it almost has the smell of like a new rubber hose. And I know that in some forms of Riesling, people talk about it having kind of a petrol or a kerosene kind of aroma to it. That's not, and they mean that in a good way, but I definitely get a unique aroma to it. And the other thing is I drank a lot of Welch's white grape juice as a kid, And there's something in the aroma and flavor of this, you know, beyond the kind of that stone fruit that reminds me a lot of Welch's white grape juice. Anyone else have, you know, have the get that same kind of Welch's white grape juice or the smell of a new rubber hose? I mean, maybe I'm losing my mind here. Maybe it's the heat. Anyone else getting any of that? Scott Dunbar, I see you're sitting there. Yeah, okay. What do you think about this one? Any comments?
I did expect it to be sweeter, and we were just sitting here talking, Suzanne and I. Suzanne's sister used to live very near the Rhine and that wine region there, and so we went and tried a lot of things there. And actually, we have this is a sparkling wine. We just were looking at this sparkling wine bottle that was from there. I'm sure I assume made with the Riesling grape. So yeah. It's really, I was afraid it would be too sweet, but I like it. I think Suzanne likes it.
Yeah, you know, this is one of my favorite grapes with, I like really spicy Indian curry, and Riesling to me is just a great match with those curry dishes. It's also really good with really spicy, like cold Asian noodles. I think that acidity and that little bit of residual sugar helps to kind of soften the that high heat from a pepper. You know, those chili peppers that tend to be in Asian noodle dishes. But it's, you know, I guess it's probably why you see Riesling on the wine list in a lot of Indian and Thai restaurants, because they go so well with those dishes. But I also like Riesling with blue cheese. Riesling and Gorgonzola to me it sounds really wacky, but I think there's just something about that crisp Riesling and that really kind of funky, you know, kind of, you know, that the blue vein cheeses to me that make a really terrific match.
I think the acid is key. You know, as a winemaker, we want to have a balanced wine, and you got to have good acidity. And we get that in Washington State. You said, you know, Germany's very cool, but we also have cool nights here. You know, it can be 90 degrees during the day, but we'll have like a diurnal swing. It'll be 50 degrees at night, locks in the acidity, and that's a balancing. And that goes with that cheese. You're making me hungry because I haven't started dinner yet. But it works with that fat and creaminess of the cheese, and that's the good acidity of a Riesling. And I love Riesling. I age it, like you said. I've got a friend that lives in Germany. I go visit him when I go hit his cellar. He's got some killer Bordeaux's, this and that. I always go for his older Rieslings, because we just don't. I don't see them that much in the U.S. They're you can find them, but they're just harder to find. But the acid is kind of key about getting to chemistry on it.
Yeah, I know, and we like to talk about, we like to, you know, we're not afraid to go a little bit deeper here. One thing, Merf, I did want to ask you about is I remember when I first opened up the wine today. I know by design it's not a spritzy wine like you would get if you opened up a Vino Verde or something, but I got a little tingle on my tongue, and I don't know if there's a little bit of dissolved CO2 in here that happens after bottling, but it definitely kind of tingled on my tongue, the top of my tongue a little bit.
Yeah,
any reason why that would be happening?
I don't make Riesling. I know a little bit about it, but a lot of times I think winemakers will leave in a little bit of the CO2 and, you know, a little gas to it to have that, because it's a nice sensation. Obviously, it's corked or a twist-off bottle. You can't have too much in there, or it'll be a little weird. And there also actually there's some taxation that goes in if you get too much CO2. Higher level CO2 is a different tax bracket. But I think some winemakers and some styles will leave a little of that little in there, which is it adds to the wine, as in like beer or in champagne or sparkling. You know, when you've got those bubbles and CO2, it actually gives you more nasal, more aromatics, and so maybe that's what you're picking up.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess it's like alcohol being volatile helps to, as you swirl it,
Sure.
helps to release some of those aromas. I guess that little bit of CO2 is kind of uh, doing the same thing. I'm looking at some of the comments here. Allison said she's having this with a 3-year-old or aged Gouda, and she said that this with that aged Gouda is dynamite. That sounds fantastic. Um, and yeah, several comments about it being surprisingly not sweet. And I think that's what makes this so food friendly in the summertime. I mean, you know, lots of things you can be pulling from in the summertime as a wine to start with, whether it's a Sauvignon Blanc, a Pinot Gris. But I mean, I could totally see this with, like crab cakes and a remoulade, that little bit of sweetness. I mean, and with that acidity, and it's still a light-bodied wine, but it still has some roundness on the palate that makes it, it can kind of punch a little bit above its weight. I think I think it's dynamite. Yeah, I'm gonna have another sip now that it's warming up. I can definitely get more of that stone fruit and those floral elements to it that are quite delicious.
One thing that's unique about Washington Riesling, in my opinion, is, and I love German Riesling, but that's, as you know, it's like you've got the slate and it's very minerality and definitely influences the flavor. With a lot of varietals in Washington State, including Chardonnay and the Cabernet I've had, the fruit expresses itself. So you're getting that floral, like you said, and the fruit characteristics versus more of the minerality, which I love. But it's like that's one uniqueness and difference for the Washington State one. It's definitely more aromatic in that sense.
Yeah. And also too, Merf, I was thinking this goes back to what you were saying about the having more daylight hours or sunshine during the fall, which, is a little above my pay grade, but I'm assuming that's helps develop some of those characteristics in grapes like Riesling that wouldn't otherwise get that long ripening. I mean, yeah, they do try and work it in Germany and Austria to get as much ripened as they can, but nothing beats that extra sunlight, I'm sure.
The grapes love the sun, and you were talking about latitude earlier and where we're at. It's a little tough on me on trying to get to sleep though, because in the longest day of the year, and in June we'll have sunsets about 10 o'clock, and it's 4 a.m. 4 a.m.
Yeah,
which I don't mind, but at night trying to go to sleep when the sun's still up, which I mean it's good for grapes.
Yeah,
they love the sun. They love to have some sun. So, but hard to go to sleep on as I get older.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Chardonnay. This is I know obviously you don't make this wine, but it's part of the mothership. And Chateau Saint Michel has been making lots of Chardonnay and both broad Chardonnays from the Columbia Valley. You see them in all different iterations, from Indian Wells to Horseheaven Hills to all these different types of Chardonnays that have more specificity. But again, just in terms of good, easy to find, good values, I've always been a fan of, and I'm not a huge Chardonnay fan, but I love this style of Chardonnay that has a little more ripeness, but it's definitely not a warm climate Chardonnay, not too much oak, just enough of that malolactic fermentation that you get some of that creaminess, but not overwhelmed. And I noticed the first glass I poured that I got a little bit of that color. So obviously this has some oak aging, but it's still light enough that and even on the nose, you're not blown away by all that heavy oak and vanilla. It's a nice expression of a new world Chardonnay. And again, I've got to think that yes, it's stylistically, it's what Chateau Saint Michelle is going for, but it's also indicative, I would imagine, of Washington. And I mean, again, in terms of latitude, it's right there with the, the Côte d'Or. So, where you've got the Côte de Beaune, I mean, you're kind of right in the heartland in terms of what's going on in Burgundy for their top Chardonnays.
Well, I love Chardonnay, and it's fun to make because winemakers can be so creative with it. It's a white wine that's made like a red wine. It's one of the few that has, barrel aging, and you touched on a little bit, depending on how much barrel aging or barrel fermenting you use, depends on the style of the wine you're making, whether you're going to have very fruit forward or the nuances of oak or more butter side. But Chardonnay is the #1 planted varietal, white varietal in Washington State. So that says something. And that's huge, and it's doing really well. Chardonnay grows well in many regions of the world. That might be one of the reasons it's so popular. But it's very dependent on the region and the winemaker. I think you have the 17 you're pouring.
Yep, that's right.
And that was you kind of touched on it, but that was a cooler vintage. And I use that loosely in Washington State because it's nice and warm here, but it was a cooler vintage, and that usually throws a little bit more of like orchard fruit, like pear, peach, apple.
Yeah.
And in warmer vintages, we'll get more pineapple, kind of mango, tropical fruits. So as a winemaker, that's fun to be able to play around with that, and it's different each year. Bob Berteau made this at Saint Michelle, and I'm not positive on it, but I think he did, definitely did. I don't know percentages, but I know he did some oak aging and some stainless. And you mentioned it on the malolactic. So some of it's going through malolactic, some of it's not. I mean, I know people are making Chardonnay that's 100% stainless and not going through more acidic and crisp. But I'm pretty sure Bob does a blending of that to get to the point where he likes it. So
I think
great wine.
When I read when I was reading about the 2017, I think he did 45% was barrel aged. And the other thing that I think was interesting, which we've talked about it with some wines, but as I was reading about the wine, the majority of it goes through about 6 months of surly aging. And so that is adding that another level of creaminess and complexity.
Yep.
And we've talked about it, but for those of you who don't know about surly aging, it's a classic kind of post-fermentation technique where the spent yeast is allowed to actually, as it settles to the bottom, where you would normally kind of rack that off, they let the dead decomposing yeast stay in the liquid, and they literally come and they stir it. It's called batonnage, but they literally take this baton looking thing. It's kind of like a funky looking golf club thing where they stir it up and they remix all of that yeast, dead yeast, into the liquid. And as it continually settles and then gets back in contact with the juice, it's adding and sometimes they do that. Can add like a kind of a toasty, yeasty quality, but really what it does, it adds some creaminess to it, and definitely adds some complexity. So you get some roundness on the palate. It just makes for a I guess greater depth of flavor and mouthfeel when you're doing that. And I noticed that was one of the techniques used on this Chardonnay.
And 6 months is a long time to do that. We make a Bordeaux white at Northstar, a Semillon majority of it, and we stir it as well. And you get a bunch of mouth texture, creaminess, and a lot of aromatics. We don't call it dead yeast, though. We call it autolyzed yeast. Dead's a little extreme. but when the fermentation slows down, the yeast falls to the bottom of the barrel, and you're just stirring that up and mixing it in. And again, Chardonnay and Bordeaux white, Semillon, there's a few wines that are in barrel that you can do that to, again, add complexity to a wine. And it's labor intensive, very labor. I mean, it's done by hand. It's so it's It makes for better wine.
Yeah, what's really interesting is for those of you who are curious about it, you should go onto YouTube, and there are tons of videos where they put a light inside the barrel, or they'll have a plexiglass on one end of the barrel on the head, and you can actually see it's like sometimes you don't want to see the sausage being made, but they clarify all that out during the process. But you just see all these little floating, wonderful little things in there, and you can see when they actually begin to do the batonnage and the stirring. I mean, I don't know, Merf, but it seems like that sometimes that yeast can be a few inches thick on the bottom, and it's like sometimes you see those National Geographic specials where like a stingray or something's buried under the sand, and when they move,
exactly,
the whole thing kind of vibrates and moves and undulates, and then it just the whole barrel fills up with this. It's like looking at the world's most amazing barrel of high gravity beer. But I guess that's kind of the same thing. You've got that auto lease or whatever the term was that you used to describe the yeast.
It's our version of hazy IPA.
Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, but it definitely adds something, a nice quality to this wine at this price point. Again, it's real food friendly, but it has that wonderful acidity, bright fruit. Definitely get that green Granny Smith apple, and a little hint of the vanilla from the oat. But still, this, I think I would love this with like a shrimp salad, or like a shrimp po' boy. I know some people are saying that they had this with camembert, really unctuous, cream, triple cream cheese, that it's just that acidity cuts right through it. You've got those pear apple elements that really kind of link up with the cheese that make this really delicious. But I mean, you could have this with turkey burgers, with roast chicken, whatever. I mean, it's real flexible when it comes to food.
It's very food friendly, and for us here, we live by what's coming off, what harvest is, and we grow asparagus here. So grilled asparagus, fabulous grilled asparagus, and then we also have wall-to-wall sweet onions, anything off the grill, vegetables and stuff. Anything you think of like creaminess and butter to add to what you're eating, Chardonnay goes with. But I don't get too worried about what I pair with. Some things are better than others, but that's what I drank a lot of the Merf Chardonnay with asparagus and onions until we were tired of them.
Well, I have to ask you about the Walla Walla onions. In our region, people will, sweet onions are like sweet corn. They're fighting words, and tomatoes too, because everybody feels like their region makes the best sweet corn, tomatoes, onions. So here we have Vidalia onions over in Georgia. We've got the Texas sweets in Texas. You've got the Walla Walla. I mean, you've traveled around. I mean, how good are the Walla Walla onions?
Well, I got a stick up from my area, and I love the Walla Walla sweets. You can eat them like an apple, and they're even better when you grill them. Get a little caramelization on them. But yeah, they're fantastic. And by the sweet corn, best sweet corn's in Iowa. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but actually, it's probably healthier out here because it's not as sweet. The Iowa corn is very sweet.
Yeah, I was at the Iowa State Fair 2
really?
years ago, which was like Disney World. I'd never seen anything like it, and the versions of corn that were served to be eaten out of hand was unbelievable. It was, but you could get corn on a stick, pork chops on a stick. You could get anything and everything there. It was phenomenal. Yeah. I didn't see a lot of wine there. Saw a lot of beer vendors, but no wine. But my goodness, they are not afraid to brag on their corn there. Well, good. Well, let's pop over. Unless anyone has questions about the Chardonnay, let's hop over to the cab. this is Merf. This is your cab. I'm sure you recognize this bottle, right? So you are at Northstar. You not to pigeonhole you, but you're a Merlot man. Some of, I guess, or a lot of the acclaim for the winery and some of the wines that you've made are around Merlot. I noticed that the red blend that you do is more of like a right bank Merlot dominant version of a Bordeaux blend. So here you have Cab. You've got two varietals under the Merf brand. You've got a Chardonnay and a Cab. So tell us about why Cab does so well in Washington, because one of the things that I noticed about this wine that the first time I had it was a lot of times in cooler regions, I get a little bit of that pyrazine, that green bell pepper, where it's not quite ripe. But this Cab is delicious, man. Like real wonderful, fruity and great acidity, super smooth. I mean, this is it's a fun wine to drink for sure.
Thank you. I mean, Cabernet does really well. It's actually, it's the #1 red varietal now. It surpassed Merlot. It's very popular. And I've been doing this for 20 some years. And over the years, it's just been getting warmer and warmer. Merlot gets ripe every year. And it will long after I'm retired in Washington. Cabernet has come into its own in Washington State in the last 10 years or so, because it's just, as we get warmer, because it comes up, you know, I'll pick Merlot and let's just say September, and Cabernet comes in October usually. If it gets warmer, it gets riper. It gets riper more. You know, instead of the pyrazines we're talking about, the green bell pepper. For those who don't know that, you need more heat. You need sunshine to kind of burn that off. I mean, you think of a grape. What we want it to do is get exposed by sun and get a suntan. You know, it responds to the sunlight, and that's where your phenolics and your flavors and colors are. And if you don't get that, you'll end up with some of these, what we think of as off flavors, little bell pepper. I don't mind veg characteristics, but not necessarily bell pepper. Anyway, so it always gets ripe and it's done well. And the other thing that's nice about Washington State and why we're able to do this project is it's still an affordable price. We're sourcing a lot of the Cabernet for the Merf now out of the Horse Heaven area, which is west of where I am in Walla Walla, about halfway from here, say to Portland. Again. It's about halfway between here and Portland. And great area for, you know, along the Columbia River, there's a plateau up there. It's great for growing Cabernet. Gets very fruit-forward wines come out of there, nice and soft, but still maintain their acidity. So yeah, Cabernet does great here, and it's not going away, and it's fun to make. We can make it full body and, you know, still soft and approachable. The wine that you have, the 2016, there is a little bit of oak fermentation, or excuse me, oak aging, not fermentation, but oak aging in this wine, and you don't see that at this price point. When I was approached to do this project, I have plenty of things going on, and I wanted to be able to make, again, something that was affordable and approachable to people. But it's nice working for St. Michel that I can actually get some oak. And you know, we're using oak in this. What does that matter? You know, it adds to the softness of the wine. It actually adds some little sweet notes without adding sugar. You know, there's complexing flavors that come out of the oak. And I usually do about 70 to 75% of it's in oak, and the remainder of it which is in for 12 months, and the rest in stainless. And we blend that together. So, but I really want to focus on and highlight what Cabernet tastes from Washington State. That was the whole plan on the wine. So,
yeah, I'm just looking at some of the comments now. Lauren said that she just loves the aroma, the nose of the Cab. That she said it's, you know, she called it floral and fruity. She said she absolutely, you know, loves it. And I would say that, you know, Merf, again, one of those, my first impressions having the wine tonight was that your use of oak, which, you know, it's always nice when you can get that, but this is a young wine, and having that little bit of time in oak and allowing it to kind of soften helps with its approachability and drinkability right out of the bottle. You know, I opened this up about an hour before we started, but you know, I can definitely get the, you know, feel that influence of it being, you know, coming right out of the gate, really a delicious wine by the glass, or with, you know, with something coming off the grill. I think I recommended brisket sliders with this, which would just be wonderful. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's good by the glass. Even on a warm day, I will say, even on a hot day, when most of the times I would be, you know, kind of staying away from a big full body red wine where you just kind of feel like you know, you got a 50-pound sack of weights on your shoulder. I mean, this has some real zip to it. And that bright fruit, not the dried fruit, but that bright fruit and fresh acidity and smoothness that makes it really super drinkable. So, I mean, I know that's part of your plan to make, you know, fun, you know, not necessarily porch pounders, but, you know, wines that are fun to drink. And this definitely falls into that category.
I don't mind porch pounder.
Yeah. Well,
don't think, drink, you know, and it's again, highlighting. I'm glad you're making those, thank you. You're making those points on, I wanted to have, this is, you know, you're drinking something from Washington State, and I want you to be able to taste that cherry, blackberry, plum, whatever.
Oh,
This is what you get out of Washington State, Columbia Valley specifically, versus other parts of the world. We all have the same barrels and this and that. So this is the one thing that sets us apart. So
yeah,
the wine's also available in cans when you talked about on a hot day. Yeah,
okay.
These are awesome to chill down, taking on the boat, golfing, you know, hiking. You know, I don't mind them chilled. It was you know, new to me when we started doing this, and it was like, chill them down. You know, you're not going to get as much aromatics, but it's pretty refreshing on a hot day.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Yeah, and again, if you know, folks that have been on these virtual tastings know that, you know, we like to have our reds slightly chilled, just to, you know, brighten them up a little bit. But
you can always warm them up.
That's right.
I'd rather err on the cooler side.
That's right. Well, I'm looking at some of the comments now, Merf, and
sure.
Let's see. Scott and Suzanne are saying that they are loving this with blue cheese, and they're also having some peppered pork tenderloin with it. They said, which was fantastic. And then Meg is enjoying the wine, but wondered if what this would be like with a little ground lamb. She has some leftovers. If you felt like you know, I mean, when I think of lamb, I think of Syrah, but you know, what do you think about? What would you think about, you know, some lamb with this one?
Absolutely. I mean, with anything hearty foods are good with hearty wine. Cabernet is very hearty. What I mean by that, it's kind of, it can hold its own against something big and bold. And going back to now we're into tannin. You know, we got acid here. We also got tannin here, which is also something which is, you know, something we get out of the skins that helps with whatever you're having. Yeah, any lamb would be great.
So on the subject of tannin, because again, like many people who had the Riesling and felt like they were pleasantly surprised that it wasn't too sweet, that it was kind of slightly off dry, I'm seeing some feedback that folks are pleasantly surprised that this isn't, that the tannins here are smooth, and you can, you know, just barely feel them, but they're not tannins that you would normally associate with the Cabernet Sauvignon. So I guess the question to you is there something unique about the extraction or the maceration process where you're limiting the amount of extraction that goes in? I mean, how are you moderating that mouthfeel? Because especially in a wine that's a 2016, 2017, I would have expected a swig and, like, you know, the enamel to come off my front teeth, or my, you know, the top of my tongue to be dry. So, I mean, what's the secret sauce here? Because this is
must be a good winemaker. No, I've done a lot of, I'm a science geek, and I've done a lot of tannin research. Actually, one of I digress, but way back when Dr. Jim Harbison came up from UC Davis, and we've done tannin analysis for years. I've always tried to make my wine soft and approachable. We have plenty of tannin and color in Washington State. Sad or good, we leave a lot of things behind after fermentation. You know, we press ins because we have plenty of tannin. But my goal is to make things balanced, and the balance is between the tannin, the acid, and the alcohol. That's your triangle of what you're working with. So you don't want the drying tannins. If you're making something big and bold, you're going to lay down. I make a wine at Northstar that's 30. It'll go 30 years. It's called Premier, and that I make that a little bit bigger, bolder, a little more acid to it. This is, and I appreciate your comments that people are getting what I'm trying to create. So I go a little less time on skins, a little cooler fermentation. When I say that, we're still, talking geeking out here in science, but we're doing more 78, 80 degrees fermentation. Higher you go, the more extraction, the more time you're on the skins. For those out there who don't know, red wine, you're fermenting on skins and you're punching down or you're pumping over. There's different methods that you're trying to extract things from the skins, which is color, flavor, phenols, which are flavors, and tannins. Tannin is the part that's, it actually binds with proteins in your mouth. And that's when you know when you've had a wine, you're like, puckering up, or it's really drying. It's binding with your saliva. So you have to find that happy medium, and you can analyze this. You can measure how much tannin you have in your wine. And 20 some years of doing this, I've kind of dialed it in where I feel comfortable and balance things. And vintages are slightly different as well. So try to make them soft.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at, Katie said that they paired it with grilled steak kebabs and grilled veggies. They opened it up for about an hour and they're loving it. Allison says she has it with a smoked Gouda, which I love smoked Gouda and cab.
I haven't eaten yet, right?
No. Listen,
and it's 6 o'clock in the West.
I know.
The West.
I know.
I'm getting kind of hungry here. But anyway, go ahead. Go on.
And then Michelle said, wow, this is cool. She said her husband made his grandmother's beef stroganoff recipe, which again, you've got the beef, the cream, you've got all its elements. It's like, oh my goodness, that and a loaf of bread. Now I'm hungry. Yeah, wow, that's super. Yeah,
I get a lot of questions, and you probably do as well, on pairing. I always say there's drink what you like. There's no right or wrong, but some things pair better than others. Experiment and try it out.
Yeah, I agree. Well, look, we're at the top of the hour. So I think short of Merf eating his hand, he may be willing to stick around for a few minutes to answer some questions. But like we always do, for those of you who need to jump, thank you for joining. Again, if you would like to make a virtual tip donation tonight for United Ability, you can do that. Venmo at Jones is Thirsty. Thank you. And for those of you who want to stick around for a little more Q&A, we'll have at it until Merf just can't take it anymore. But this would be a good time, Merf, if you wouldn't mind, since we're focusing on your cab. Again, I think of cab particularly as you look at the left bank and right bank, where Merlot and cab ripen at different times. Looks like cab historically needs a little more time on the vine. So is it those extra daylight hours that allows the grapes to slowly ripen and get not only ripen on the outside, but I guess phenolically or physiologically ripen as well, where the grape is ripe all the way through without burning off all that acidity? Is that, again, one of the hallmarks of being at that higher latitude and that high desert? And
it goes back to, we call it heat units, so we have a little more heat units they've been rising. So it's like there's more warmth through the Cabernet. Cabernet will go through veraison sometimes before Merlot, which is crazy, but it has a longer growing season than Merlot. Every varietal is different. but it's found this sweet spot where it's has plenty of sunshine and gets ripe, but still maintains its acidity. Because especially when you get into, we get into October, then the it's less daylight, not as much time each day, which maintains that great acidity, but it's had plenty of time to have, which I love that time of year.
Yeah.
And it makes for great wines when they can sit there and hang and they're not moving. Because we talked about in the beginning, it's like what happens when things are getting ripe. Sugars are rising, acids are dropping.
Yep.
At the end of the day, the plant's trying to, it's survival, and it wants to make the fruit as tasty as it can for deer, birds, and to populate. So Cab it does well. It's done well in October, and I don't see that going away.
Yeah. Yeah. And then,
I love Merlot, though. I will say that. I love Merlot.
I was going to say.
Merlot gets the bad rap. I love Merlot. I wouldn't be at Northstar if I didn't. Merlot is so versatile. I love Merlot.
Yeah. That I was going to transition right into Merlot, because I am a fan of Merlot. I like wines from Pomerol. I like Saint-Emilion. I like that Cab Franc Merlot blend. And again, going back to some of those really higher priced, age-worthy Northstar wines that you create, just help us understand how you work with Merlot. When we did about 2 months ago, we did a virtual wine event called Anything But Cab. And one of the wines that we had was the Velvet Devil. So it was another one of those Charles Smith portfolio. But again, everyone was like, wow, I didn't know Merlot could, again, at that price point, I didn't think Merlot could do this after they had seen Sideways too many times. So, but Merlot is a phenomenal grape. And I've had some wonderful Merlots from Washington, but the kind of what you're doing with it seems to be kind of next level. So how do you kind of deal with Merlot versus Cab and some of the other red grapes that you're using in the, your program?
I love Merlot, and I jumped into this at a winery that, St. Michel created Northstar, the brand, and the wines for Merlot.
Yeah.
First vintage was 94 for Northstar. Merlot was on fire. It was doing great. The movie that we still haven't forgotten about, Sideways, put a ding in it. But one good thing that came out of that, though, is that Merlot got so popular that there was some mediocre, watered down Merlots out there, so weeded out those. But never be afraid to drink Merlot. I love Merlot. It's very versatile with different foods, whatever you're having to eat. And we can go on and on about the highest priced wines in the world. Great Merlot out of Italy. Great, right bank Merlots. When you have one, they're great. And a lot of the Merlot is going into red blends now these days. A lot of this is a business sometimes. Yeah. So it's where's the Merlot going? But it's a very versatile grape, and it's so delicious to drink. But I don't think it hits you over the head. That's one of my theories on Cabernet. Hits you over the head. Anybody taste that, whether you're a novice or an expert wine taster, you can go, oh, I picked something up. Merlot is very subtle. You gotta kind of look for things that are going on in the wine. But I love making it. Continue to make it, and that's what Northstar was created on.
Yeah, well, you brought up an interesting point there. Some of my favorite super Tuscans, or our Toscanas these days, it's a lot of Sangiovese, a lot of Merlot, a little bit, Cab, obviously some of those Bordeaux varietals sneaking in there. But I think people forget how much Merlot makes up some of those blends. It really is a grape that does well and adds a lot of structure and elegance to some of those blends to kind of make it, kind of bring it all together.
Well, and unfortunately, a lot of them can be out of people's price points too. That's what's great about Washington. You can get a killer Merlot for $12 out of Washington State, and there's some awesome ones at $40, and there's some great ones at $250.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
just the starting point for some of the high-end right bank, or we go to Massetto or something in Italy. So
Yeah. So I'm also getting some comments, Merf, about folks wanting to, to know a little bit more about how they can get your Northstar wines. I know you have a mailing list, and there's you can purchase the wines online. Do you have a club? I mean, how does that, how does that
I think
work?
the best thing, probably go to the website, and we're available in all 50 states. And what's good about that is means we're posted in every state legally. So
Yeah.
you can, if I tell everybody, whether it's my wine or something else, if you find something you like, go into your local wine shop or grocery store and say, I want this wine, can you get it in? And they should be able to get it in for you.
Yeah.
If you can't find Northstar, please email me or call me. I want you to have the wine. So it should be available there.
Yeah.
We just don't, we're mainly at restaurants, which I know we're in a new world now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
For Northstar, because we don't make a lot of wine at Northstar, and it usually goes into restaurants, and some of it goes into what we call off-premise or grocery stores and that. But it's usually higher end wine shops and or certain grocery stores. So you're not going to see it everywhere like you will Merf Cabernet.
Yeah, well, I've been looking for a bottle of that Stella Blanca for a while, because
Ooh.
I love white Bordeaux's, and I want to ask you about that, but I've gotten several questions.
I think I know somebody that could probably get that to you.
Well, we'll talk. Well, I'm going to meet that person, but I've gotten a few questions about wine preservation, and not often do we have an enologist and a winemaker on the tasting, but in terms of all the things that are available to regular consumers, whether it's your refrigerator or a vacuum vent or whatever, in terms of doing your best to preserve an open bottle of wine, what are your tips for making that happen? For mortals.
Open bottle, drink it.
Other than, yes, of course.
Shouldn't be left over the next day.
Yeah, I've walked right into that one.
The like the Northstar Ultra Premium wines, even the Merf Cab, is if you open it, you can still drink it the next day. That's a sign of a quality wine. They'll get better after they've been open. But I guess if you've opened a bottle and you're concerned about the worst thing you want is oxidation or like think of an apple cut in half laying on your counter. So if you can find something else to pour it into to reduce that airspace in it, or I believe wine shops probably sell neutral gas you can put into the bottle, purge it, and cap it somehow. And as storage, if you have a cellar or if you're trying to take wine or take care of wine, it's always keep it cooler. Cooler is better. Don't freeze it. Obviously, a refrigerator. But if you have a basement, I have my cellar's in the basement, and it's on the side of the house where it maintains a pretty steady temperature around the year. The one thing you don't want when you're cellaring a wine is have fluctuation of temperature. It's not good for a wine. The
liquid, I guess, is contracting and expanding as it
exactly.
heats up and cools down.
You can push a cork. I've worked some markets before where we shipped wine to, actually in the Caribbean, and you look at the wines are starting to push. It's had some heat on it. You're like, oh, I can take care of my babies. So the main thing is to keep it if you can. Ideal temperature for me is like 58, 60 degrees on reds. I don't think a lot of us are cellaring, high-end wines. I got a few nice wine, really high-end wines in the cellar, but if you're going to drink things in the next 5-10 years, 60 degrees to 58 is fine. It's just don't have that fluctuation.
Right.
But if you got a wine fridge, I got one here in my kitchen that I keep at 54, and I got whites and reds in there.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay. That's I think everyone will the takeaways are: take one for the team, finish the bottle. And if you need to lay it down, make sure that it's stored appropriately. So thank you. So let's go back to that Stella Blanca for a second. You knowing your skill around red grapes, you've got this classic Bordeaux white blend. Tell us about that. I mean, because it's, best I can tell, it's mostly Semillon with some Sauvignon Blanc and the Muscadel, which is like classic Entre deux Mer, and then, you know, going even over to some of the right bank or left bank white blends. Is that like a secret passion, or is it just you wanted to fool around?
It was kind of the, you know, the Northstar's creative. We're doing Merlot or Bordeaux house, we're doing Cabernet as well. And then if we're going to make a white, we want to make it Bordeaux style. So it's always always fun to make each year.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're fortunate to get some of the Muscadel, which is very rare. I mean, we planted that, I don't know when they planted it, in the mid 90s. And we were talking, you guys had Riesling earlier. This is one, Semillon, the Stella Blanca is one of those wines that you can age it as well. I've got Stella Blanca going back to the first vintage 2004. And I've had some from Australia as well, that they're fabulous. Because the acidity on them. And our wine we make, it's in barrel with about 10 to 20% new oak, stir it on lees like you mentioned earlier. And we only do like 350 cases a year, but it's just a delightful wine. And it's like, it's adult lemonade is what I like to call it, especially on a hot
Very
day.
good.
And,
Very good.
It's just, sometimes you get a lot of lemongrass and I love making that wine, Semillon, and it's rare. You just don't see, there's not a lot of Semillon planted in Washington State. And it's one of my theories that people don't like it as well as I don't like pronouncing these words that we don't understand. You know, Syrah is easy to pronounce. I don't know. Maybe that's just my theory.
Yeah.
But we actually call ours a white blend. I changed it 1 year. We should just start calling it a white blend because it is. And if people want to know what's in it, we'll discuss that. But some people might be intimidated to order at the restaurant a Semillon.
Yeah, sure. Well, I again, of the spectrum of wines that Northstar makes, because a lot of that is so focused on reds, I just think that's a cool send up to those Bordeaux blends, and obviously shows the flexibility of Washington to be able to produce these great wines. I mean, it's again, food friendly, super approachable. All right, everyone, before we cut Merf loose, anyone want to unmute themselves, ask a question before he goes and has a proper dinner from a day of exhausting golfing, which I'm sure had more than one or two Miller Lights, I'm assuming, while he was doing that. But let's see.
I wanted to, I didn't. We went out early.
Very good. But Merf, thank you so much for being a part of tonight's tasting. It's a thrill for everyone on the tasting to have access to a winemaker. It's just not the kind of thing that most people get a chance to rub up against and on a Saturday night in conversation. So we appreciate you being so generous with your time. From my perspective, it's just a thrill because I get a chance to, ask questions, but also I get a chance to learn. We all do. So, man, so cool to finally have you back without a thunderstorm. We love the Chardonnay. Again, I mean, I think we could talk all night about the Cab. It's just a delicious wine. And
thank you.
We, look forward to so many people. I'm looking at some of the comments are just excited to get to know more of your wines. And for those folks who weren't part of the Chardonnay call, to get on the Chardonnay train now. But I'm telling you, even in the summertime, when you're looking for a really delicious, thirst-quenching, food-friendly red, this Chardonnay is kind of a different animal. I mean, this Cab is kind of a different animal. So lots of fun. But wish you all the best with the rest of the growing season, getting into ripening and on into harvest. And maybe we can ask you to come back at another time and share a little bit about
Well,
what's going on.
it's your turn to visit.
Yeah.
Come visit Walla Walla.
Well, maybe
Tasting
we'll do,
tasting rooms are actually open.
yeah. Well, I was when we did the Chardonnay event, and Charla was on, and I was telling her, going back to your time at Yakima at the brewery, I was it's been 10 years probably. I was out there with a group of wine writers, and we got in. We left Seattle and actually drove into Yakima for the night, and we stayed at a little bed and breakfast out in the middle of nowhere. And I got up with the sun to go out for a run, and I had no idea what we drove into because it's pitch black. There's nothing out there. And I walked out of my room and went for a run, and I'd never seen hops before.
I was going to say you're in a hop field.
And I felt like I was in kind of Gulliver's Travel. I thought maybe I'd shrunk overnight, but I'd never seen anything.
Aren't they crazy?
Like trellises made out of telephone poles and these giant, it took me a while before I was comfortable. It really was a kind of an otherworldly experience, but it was beautiful, but I've never seen anything like it.
And 75% of the hops in the United States come out of Yakima Valley. So any beer you've ever had has hops out of that area you were running.
And I'm assuming it's just like grapes. They have all, like Cascade, all your different hop varietals are all grown.
It's all about alpha acids as well there, and flavor components. And there's about 30 families that grow the hops. When I was in Yakima, I was friends with a lot of them, and they've been doing it for a lot of years. And it's so amazing. When I drove out to Seattle, I was driving through there, coming from Iowa, corn and soybeans. I'm like, what is that? Yeah. They're crazy.
Yeah. 15,
20 feet tall. And the harvest, if you get a chance to see a harvest, and we're talking wine tonight, but beer, watching hop harvest is crazy aromatics and just what they do.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so before we let you go, Allison said, Merf, by the way, she's been to the Gorge for a 4-day concert.
4 days?
Okay. I'm not going to touch that. I'm just going to say.
It's probably fish.
Would love to come back with wine, is what she said. So maybe you and Allison can talk about that offline, because she said, yes, it's fish. Yeah.
How did I know? Well, you're welcome to come visit and stay with us, but you have to put up with my little miniature bull terrier.
Yeah, well, something tells me that wouldn't be a problem. All right. Well, Lauren said concerts at the Gorge are the best. Lots of comments coming in now, just saying thank you, Merf, for your time. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Really cool. Yeah. And cheers, everyone. Hope you have a good rest of Saturday and great weekend, and appreciate your support for United Ability. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks, Scott.
Yep,
thanks all.